On Saturday, the Louisville men's basketball team will look to do something that they haven't done in over 3 decades, and that's defeat Virginia on the road.
You are Locked On Louisville, your daily podcast on the Louisville Cardinals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, everyone? Welcome into this Friday edition of the Locked On Louisville podcast. I'm your host, Dalton Pence. This is my 5th year covering the University of Louisville, 3rd year hosting this show, and I want to take the time to personally thank you all for making us your first listen of the day through 2025. A reminder that the show is free and available on all streaming services 5 days a week. Your team every day. Now, today's episode of the show is brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL playoffs are almost here, but it's not too late to get in on the regular season action with FanDuel, because right now new customers can finish the season strong with $250 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. All you have to do, visit FanDuel.com to get started. The Louisville men's basketball team has not won on the road at Virginia in over 3 decades. On Saturday, Pat Kelsey's team will have the opportunity to snap that losing streak and a overall 9-game skid to the Cavaliers. We'll discuss what his team needs to do to come out victorious in this ACC clash. Harrison Bailey has entered the portal after a really solid performance in the Sun Bowl. What does this mean for the Louisville quarterbacks room next year and moving forward? Well, that's something we'll answer on the second segment. And then to conclude the show, we will dive into the weekly mailbag. We'll start out on the men's basketball side of things. The Louisville Cardinals have won the last 3 games. They are now 9-5 overall on the season, 2-1 in conference play after a 13-point win against North Carolina earlier this week. They will turn their attention to the Virginia Cavaliers. They will take on the Cavs in John Paul Jones Arena in Charlottesville on Saturday at 4 o'clock Eastern. Pretty important game in the grand scheme of things, right? I mean, Virginia has not been the greatest, but they are a respectable team. They have started out the year 8-5, 1-1 in conference play, but it's been a whirlwind of a past couple of months for this program. Tony Bennett steps down unexpectedly right before the season. Really shocked. I mean, the whole college basketball landscape was shocked. Ron Sanchez, the associate head coach, a guy who had been on Bennett's staff for the past 10 years, stepped into the interim spot, and they have been respectable. I mean, nothing very notable. 100 in the net ranking. They are 8-5 overall. The 5 losses, 4 of them by double digits. They lost by 22 to Tennessee, 25 to St. John's, 18 to Florida, 12 to SMU. Their only single-digit loss was to Memphis, a 2-point loss to the Tigers. 50th in strength of schedule, so not really comparable to Louisville's. The 2 teams that they've beaten that are respectable, Villanova, they beat by 10, and then they ended up beating NC State in their most recent game by 3 points. So Virginia 8-5, 1-1 in conference play. All signs point to Louisville being the better team. They should win this game. But if history suggests one thing, is that Virginia is the Cardinals' kryptonite. Regardless of how good or bad each team is, regardless of who the coach is, Virginia has always had Louisville's number for the most part. Since the teams started playing early in the 20th century, the Cavaliers have won 24 of the 29 games. Louisville is 5-24 against the Cavaliers all time. 4-11 at home, 1-11 on the road, and then the rest being neutral site games. They're 2-17 since joining the ACC back in the 2014-15 season. The 2 wins, one was the Mango Mathiang go-ahead game winner where everyone was like, no, yes! Gosh, what a roller coaster of emotions that game was, but that was almost 10 years ago. The only other game they won was the last win in the series back in the 2019-2020 season. Back on February 8th of 2020, they won 80-73 at the KFC Yum Center. Since then, the Cardinals have lost the last 9 games against, well, what was Tony Bennett's teams. And the last time that Louisville went on the road to Charlottesville and beat Virginia was during the 1989-1990 season. They won 72-56. Over 3 decades. I mean, we're talking about 35 years. And it's not like they played a couple times. They played a good amount of times. Louisville just has not been successful against the Cavaliers. And a lot of it's because of the clashing styles of play. Virginia's style of play has been really successful over the past decade or so, especially against Louisville. And despite not having Tony Bennett, the MO of the playing style, it's fairly the same. Not 100% a carbon copy, but it's really similar. Offense isn't the greatest, and you have a really good defense. Like, you look at what Virginia does really well, it's the same thing that they've been doing well since Tony Bennett was around. And that is they defend well, they dribble the air out of the basketball, and they force you to play in an uncomfortable setting to where it's not what you are used to. I mean, you look at what Virginia does well on offense. There's only one thing that they do that's currently ranked inside of the top 100 from a metric standpoint going into Friday's games. That is 3-point percentage. They're 29th in the country, 38.5% from behind the arc. And you talk about, how Louisville doesn't really defend the 3-point shot all that well, and that makes you a little bit worried. And then you look at the fact that they're 274th in 3-pointers attempted per game. They only attempt about 21 a game. So they make a good amount of the shots they take, but they don't take as much, if that makes sense. But you look at the rest of the numbers. Field goals attempted, 363rd nationally. 2-point percentage, 306th nationally. They don't shoot a lot of free throws, 357th. They don't get a lot of offensive rebounds, 360th. Less than 7 offensive rebounds per game. So the one thing they do well offensively is they make a good amount of their 3-point shots. That's literally it. What does that tell you? Well, the pace of play is what we always know it to be. They slow the game down, make you defend in the half court, and in turn, make you play really good half-court offense. Now, this Virginia team is definitely beatable, but it's going to take Louisville getting out of their comfort zone a little bit, playing good offense against a stingy defense, one that doesn't force a lot of turnovers, but they force you to take a good amount of bad shots, and that's what Louisville has been susceptible to early on this season, and that is bad shot selection. So it's going to be up to guys like Chucky Hepburn, Noah Waterman, Rain Smith, Javon Hadley, Terrence Edwards, good shot selection. Doesn't mean don't shoot 3-pointers. It means don't hunt the 3-point shot and force them just to take them. Like, Louisville has to do a better job at getting better shots and maximizing their offensive possessions. Defensively, this is a Virginia team, guys. 11th in the country in opponents' points per game, 60.8. They don't foul a lot, which means that the opposing team doesn't get to the free throw line a lot. Like, the teams will average 13 free throws a game against Virginia, which is not a lot. It's like 7th in the country. They're not a great rebounding team, but they're not bad. They don't force a lot of turnovers. They block shots, but overall, I mean, you look at the numbers here, 13th in 2-pointers made, 31st in 2-pointers attempted. Like, they force teams to shoot the ball from 3, and teams aren't really the greatest. I mean, they shoot a lot of 3s on Virginia, but overall, this Virginia team is just like how you would expect them to be. Not good offensively, really good defensively. You look at the numbers here. They have 2 players that score in double figures. Isaac McNeely, who's shooting 45% from 3. He's, the leader of that offense. You also have Elijah Saunders, the 6'8" transfer from San Diego State, who's averaging 12 and 5 rebounds a game. Really good from the field. I mean, their top 3 scorers are averaging about 40% from the 3-point line. Andrew Rohde, 47% from the 3-point line. So if you're Louisville, what you have to focus on doing is maximizing your offensive possessions. If you run the score up, I don't really think that Virginia is going to be able to keep pace with you. and we've seen that in their losses, is that teams are scoring points. But for the most part, I mean, let's look at the numbers. The most points that Virginia has scored in any game this season, 74. They did that in a 9-point win against Manhattan. And you look at Louisville's points per game this season, and they've only scored under 70, what was it, 4 times? Tennessee was one, Oklahoma was the other one, Ole Miss, and then Duke. Since the Duke game, they've scored at least 70 points in each of the games. So something to focus on is the clash of styles. Louisville has to be able to turn around and just not fall victim to the way that Virginia wants to make this an ugly-looking game. That's their MO. That's their playing style. That's why Louisville fans get so frustrated when you play Virginia. And it has worked for the better half of the past decade or so. But this is a different team. This is a team that you can beat, but you have to play a really clean game. And if you do that, and if you maximize your offensive possessions and you shoot the ball well from 3, you should win this game. But should and will are 2 different conversations. So we'll discuss what happens when we come back later on at the end of this weekend, early next week. But we're going to shift over to the football side of things. Harrison Bailey was the Sun Bowl MVP, and he is now in the transfer portal. We'll break down what this means for Louisville's quarterbacks room next year and moving forward when we come back on this Friday edition of the Locked On Louisville podcast. The NFL playoffs are almost here, but it's not too late to get in on the regular season action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can finish the season strong with $250 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. FanDuel has so many different ways for you to pick up a W. I love personally betting on which players will score a touchdown and how many points each team will score. It is thrilling to me. Visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your chance at $250 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. One thing that fans were concerned about with Harrison Bailey having a good performance in the Sun Bowl was that a team may come in and convince him to enter the transfer portal. And it seems like that concern is definitely justified because Harrison Bailey threw 3 touchdowns in the Sun Bowl, won MVP honors, one of a handful of quarterbacks in Louisville football history to throw for 3 touchdowns in a bowl game. On Friday, he announced that he was entering the transfer portal, and a lot of fans were worried about that, and that's sort of the benefit and the drawback, right? The benefit is that the player has a really good performance in the bowl game, helps the team win the game. The drawback is that it could then lead a team to say, hey, look, why don't you enter the portal and come be our QB1 next season? 2 things here. Number one, who knows if Bailey was using the Sun Bowl to get some good tape and enter the portal regardless? Or, who knows? Maybe a team did see what Bailey was able to do in the Sun Bowl and say, hey, look, why don't you come play for us? Regardless, the Cardinals have their QB1 locked in for next season, Miller Moss. So I know that there were conversations in the comments under my YouTube page. There were conversations on social media as to why can't Harrison Bailey compete for QB1 with Miller Moss? And the short answer is that he could have had he stayed for spring ball. The reality is that he wasn't likely to beat out Miller Moss in the QB1 competition. Moss is arguably, without a doubt, the better quarterback. And that's not to say, what I'm about to say, number one, isn't suggesting that Bailey's a bad quarterback, and number 2, isn't trying to take away the significance of the performance that he had. But Bailey didn't necessarily have an elite performance against Washington. It looks better because he had the 3 touchdowns, and he made the throws that he was supposed to make, and that's great. But he didn't make elite-level throws. He went 16 of 25 for 164 and 3 touchdowns. It wasn't the greatest performance against a 6-6 Washington team that didn't have the greatest defense. It was a good performance, one that helped Louisville to win the game. And for that, I applaud Harrison. I wish him the best at whatever route he decides to go, wherever he decides to end up. I will cheer for him, and I hope he has a great year of eligibility. He has one more year, and I hope that he has the year that he's looking for. I will be cheering for him, and I know you all will be too. But just because he played good in the Sun Bowl doesn't mean that he should be the QB1 of Louisville next year. And I don't think that many people think that, but there are some that do, and that's the only reason why I'm addressing it. Now, you do lose a proven backup for next year. That's sort of maybe a little bit of a worry. You have Deuce Adams, Mason Mims as an incoming freshman, and then Brady Allen has taken his name out of the portal. So you have 4 scholarship quarterbacks. Travis Egan is also in that room, the Bullet East star that has played special teams, the walk-on. So you lose a potential proven backup, but you really can't expect a guy in his final year of eligibility who I guess could have competed in the spring and transferred after spring ball, or maybe he bet on himself saying, you know what, the spots are going to fill up. Let me go ahead and enter the portal now so I know that I have a spot, because so many players are entering the portal and there aren't as many spots for players to go to. So, it's kind of a huge timing aspect. But moving forward, you have 4 guys. You've got Miller Moss, who's projected to be QB1. You've got Deuce Adams, Mason Mims, and Brady Allen. That's 4 guys in the room, and then Travis Egan. Brom likes to have numbers in the quarterback's room, so what wouldn't surprise me is that I'm not sure if this will happen or not. If Brady Allen didn't announce he was coming back, then I for sure believe that it would have happened. But maybe Brom goes to the portal, gets a quarterback that doesn't have the production, but he believes in the skill set, maybe a higher-rated guy coming out of high school that just hasn't gotten the opportunity, that has multiple years of eligibility, that can be depth for Miller Moss this year and then contend for the starting spot in 2026. Because the way that I see it, I think you have your quarterback of the future on the team. I think that Deuce Adams, with another year learning this offense, remember, he wasn't an early enrollee. He came in at the end of the spring. So this was his first year. I think with another year learning this Brom offense, I would believe that Moss is the guy in 25 and Deuce Adams could be the guy in 26. Like, I really do think that is a very likely plan of action that the Broms are looking to pursue. Now, whether or not they're going to bring in a guy, TBD. But do you trust Brady Allen, Deuce Adams, or true freshman Mason Mims to come in and potentially win a football game if Miller Moss goes down? If that answer is yes, you might not go get another guy. But there's also the health aspect of it as well, and injuries do happen in football. There's been this argument amongst the fan base that Jeff Brom will forever just go and get veteran portal quarterbacks to fill the quarterback needs. And I think that he's done that the past 3 years because he's had to. Plummer, Shuck, and now Miller Moss is that he doesn't believe that anyone on the roster can come in and without a doubt be the go-to guy. Pierce Clarkson, Brady Allen, Harrison Bailey, Brock Dolman, Evan Conley. And that really shouldn't surprise you all. Because if the goal is to win, you're going to go out and get the best option available. I think if Brom had a choice, it would be recruit a guy at quarterback, let him develop, and then be a multiple-year starter. And I think that is the plan of action for Deuce Adams. I am a huge believer in his skill set. There's not many throws he can't make. I think that the one thing that Adams will have to just continue to improve on is that internal clock, being able to throw guys open and being able to make the reads a lot quicker than he has been. And if he's able to do that, then there's no reason to believe that he won't be QB1 at some point in his Louisville career. And I think that's going to be very different of a conversation in 2026. And you also potentially have Mason Mims that could contend for that spot. And if you do bring in a quarterback with multiple years of experience, he will contend for the spot in 2026. So I think that the quarterback battle in 26 is going to be much different than it was in years past. Like, I think there's going to be much more of a look internally. And if there's not, then there's a question that we need to have about, maybe the quarterback scouting from a high school standpoint, or maybe we have to, readjust our expectations of maybe Braum just going to the portal to get portal quarterbacks. You would assume that Miller Moss is a one and done. I think he's got multiple years of eligibility left, if I'm not mistaken. He's played 2 full years. Looking at the numbers here, 2021, 22, 23, and 24. He's technically been in college football for 4 years. I would say that he's probably just going to play one more season. And I mean, that's probably got to be the expectation. I don't think he probably plays a second unless, the NCAA comes out with a new ruling, and it seems like they're trying to do that whole, you have 5 years to play 5 or whatever. I don't know how that's going to work. And if it even does get passed at all. But I don't think that there's any real reason to worry about Harrison Bailey entering the portal. I ultimately thought at the end of the season that he was going to be one of the first to enter the portal anyway, because he's the one with 1 year of eligibility remaining, and he's likely not going to be QB1 for the Cardinals next year. So it sucks that you don't have a proven backup for next year, but it's sort of selfish to suggest that he was going to come back after potentially maybe being a QB1 for someone else next year. So when we come back on this Friday edition of the show, we're going to dive into the weekly mailbag, a couple questions that I want to answer that you all have presented. So we'll do that when we come back. Did Rocket Money help you find any subscriptions you forgot about or that you were paying for twice? That definitely happened to me. I had a few subscriptions that I didn't even realize I was still paying for, and Rocket Money made it so easy to track them all down. It's like having a personal assistant for your finances. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps find and cancel your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps lower your bills so you can grow your savings. It brings everything together all in one place, whether it's subscriptions, spending habits, or even goals you want to hit this year. Rocket Money has over 5 million users and has saved a total of $500 million in canceled subscriptions, saving members up to $740 a year when using all the app's premium features. For me, the best feature that I like is the subscription tracker. I've used it to cancel services I wasn't using anymore, and I've already saved a ton. Plus, with their goals feature, I've been able to automatically set aside money for my future and not stress about budgeting every month. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/lockedon today. That's rocketmoney.com/lockedon. rocketmoney.com/lockedon. Cardinal fans, I want to take the time to thank you all again for making us your first listen of the day through 2025. Hope the new year has been good to you already. Just a reminder, the show is free and available on all streaming services 5 days a week. Your team every day. Couple of good questions to round the week out in this week's mailbag edition. Better late than never. Do you think Ron English will be the defensive coordinator for Louisville next year, and should he be? Well, do I think so? I think that he either will be or he won't. So I would say it's probably a 50-50 chance. We haven't heard anything yet, but I imagine if we do hear something, it will be in the next couple of days. Should he be? I've been very clear about my stance on this. The staff raved about the defensive talent all offseason last year, and for good reason. I mean, it's a really talented defense with some All-American potential candidates, but what we saw on the field, 61st in total defense. Had a good performance against Clemson, Pittsburgh, and Kentucky to end the year. You got embarrassed to Stanford, got embarrassed by Miami, got embarrassed by SMU, and you lost to Notre Dame. It wasn't totally your fault, but you didn't make things easy. 8-4, while being, according to the Sun Bowl broadcast, the only offense in college football to score 24 points a game, with arguably one of, if not the most talented defense that Jeff Brom will ever have as a head coach. I just don't see how you can be confident moving forward when you have to replace the entire side of the football. The defense is likely not going to be as talented as it was this year. So I guess my question to you all is, outside of, you can't really even say continuity because you're replacing the majority of the starters. What have you seen that suggests that this defense can take the next step forward, unless you're just talking about a drastic and dramatic shift in schematics, which I don't think that that's going to happen. So from what I've seen, I think that I can't be confident next year if there aren't changes made at that spot. I'm just being completely honest. Ron English is a very likable guy. He's a friend of Jeff Brom. His players love him. He's had some good moments. It hasn't been like Brian Van Gorder, Peter Sermon bad, but it also hasn't helped as much as it should. So should he be? That's up for you all to decide. I probably would say no, based on what happened this year. But if he's back, whatever, something has to change schematically. So who do you think will be the next portal commitment? Well, they've got some guys on campus this weekend. I really don't know. One might commit while we're recording this show at about 5 o'clock on Friday. And if that happens, then there's your answer. I really don't know. I know that there was this situation to where, Isaiah Nayer, the transfer from Nebraska, the wide receiver, ended up, supposedly signing with Louisville and then withdrawing his portal documents. It sounded like the agent may have jumped the gun there a little bit in terms of timing. I don't know the full situation, but wide receiver transfer from Nebraska, Isaiah Nayer would probably be my prediction, but could be a couple different guys. Louisville won the first game of January. Predict the rest of the month from a record standpoint. So they have 8 games in January, 7 games left. They beat North Carolina. I think they're going to go 5-2 to round out the month. I think that they're going to beat Syracuse on the road. I think they're going to beat Wake Forest. So that would give you 2 wins. I think that they're going to split Pittsburgh and SMU on the road. That will give you 3 wins. And then you have 2 games against Virginia. Then you have Clemson. I think you're going to win 2 of those 3. That would give you a 5-2, move you to 14-7 overall, and have you sitting really good in ACC play. You'd be 6-4. I'm sorry, 7-4, which I think would be pretty good leading into the month of February, because January is significantly tougher than February from a team matchup perspective. So I'm going to be optimistic. I'm going to say 5-2 here, but that's just something that we'll have to see. So I do kind of worry that, on the road at SMU, at Pittsburgh, 2 teams that are better than what maybe people believe that they are, that could be an issue, but I'm gonna say Louisville goes 5-2. How likely of a chance do you think the Cardinals will have to land Tyron Stokes and Elijah Arenas for 2025? Well, Stokes is still a 2026 guy. I know that there is rumors that he's going to reclassify to 2025 or could, but until that happens, I'm going to operate under the assumption that he's going to stay in 2026. If he does go to 2025, the rumor is that he wants a package similar to AJ Devanza from BYU, which is rumored to be about $7 million. So if you have that type of funding to be able to go out and get a Tyron Stokes level guy and also have funding to create a competitive team, then you're going to have a good shot to land him. I just don't know that you do have that funding. That is a question. Arenas, I don't think it's all that likely. They talked about the 3 teams that are mentioned with him. I think he's a heavy Arizona lean. So I don't think that there's a great chance at the moment until I hear something different. So I would say the chance to land Arenas is under 30%, and I'd probably say the same. I'd probably say it's under 40% for Tyron Stokes, in my opinion. So it's going to wrap up this weekly Mailbag edition. If any commitments break between now and the next episode, then we will instinctively talk and discuss about, or we will talk about and discuss that commitment when we come back. But everyone have a great weekend. Stay warm, stay safe, go Cards. We'll see you right back here in a couple days.